Alright, let's cut to the chase. What's up with Deltarune's colors? So, as far as I'm aware, there's no definitive consensus on what the hell Deltarune is even trying to say with its use of colors. What's going on with pink and gold? Why are the characters the colors that they are? What the hell is going on with that one Rudin that says copies are monochrome? And why is half the community now frothing at the mouth when they see something in grayscale? Well, I have the answers, hopefully. Anyway, the conclusion about what pink and gold represent, the symbolism of monochrome, and whatever the hell green and in between mean, are not only interesting in their own right, but I think that they uncover exactly where Deltarune is headed, and how it will end. Jumping right in, there's a few more obvious aspects to how color is used in Deltarune. The colors are a lot brighter in the Dark World, even if that sounds counterintuitive, including the characters, especially Susie, who becomes a visibly more vibrant character in these Dark Worlds. This is an obvious representation of how fiction can often be more appealing than a dreary reality that has to be endured. Besides that, each main character of Deltarune has a color primarily associated with them. Chris is cyan, Susie is a pinkish purple, Rousey is green, and Noelle is yellow. This concept is brought up in several different ways throughout the game, the color of the damage numerals, as well as each character's combat facial portraits, outline and darkness, health bar, and basically just overall UI for doing anything in battle. Also, just look at them. Talking about specific individual colors outside of this group, however, red seems to be the most obvious one to account for first, with countless examples of red being important in the game. The red soul, eyes going red when making fountains, and the red guitar, even though it looks straight up orange. All paint red is an extremely interesting color. First of all, red is Death's color, just straight up. I already mentioned the red guitar, but under Death's Knight theory, which according to my poll is by far the most popular opinion, we know that underneath the black shade, Death's patented color is red. Just like the 4 party members each have their own color for UI and in particular damage text correlation like I mentioned, the Knight's is red. That's not even mentioning the Knight's iconic red slashes, which draw even more connections between the Knight and red as a color. This makes sense, considering that the most in-your-face instance of red being used is in the Soul, the tool instrumental to the plan to save Death's. But just like anything to do with us as the Soul in the context of Chris and Carol's agenda and the thematics of freedom, it's a two-sided coin. We can exert our power in a way those two manipulators never intended, flummoxing their plan completely in the weird route, and that's when the red really takes over. But we'll get back to that later. Returning to the party members' primary 4 color choices, these are seemingly extremely intentional, while also possessing very interesting implications in the greater narrative. I mean, Toby has designed these characters for so long, since 2016, there's no way he didn't put thought into what colors he chose as their primary shade. I feel like many people get too caught up in Undertale's ballgame flavor text, the one giving every soul a personality trait, especially in how it's applied to Deltarune. This is probably just because of how easily perseverance and kindness tie to Susie and Rousey respectively, but patience for Chris, and especially justice for Noelle, have always just struck me as the stretchiest of stretches, and for a theory that doesn't really mean anything besides being a somewhat cool observation. And yes, I've seen the just ice interpretation, but guys, come on. It can't just be me who thinks that's completely unintentional and a complete stretch. And I'm a Deltarune theorist, so that's saying a lot. As a group, there are several connections to color schemes that these 4 have. Most tenuous is the Fun Gang RGB, with red being filled by Susie due to Red Buster and being the closest to red, and how when you mix these together you get white, since the Fun Gang works together to seal the darkness with the light inside our soul. The only reason I bring this up is because of the interesting contrast that comes into play when you consider the alternate color system, CMY, cyan, magenta, yellow. Not only do these match the colors of our lighteners this time quite a bit better, but since this is a subtractive system of colors, they mix to create black, and since Chris and Susie both have created fountains, this depicts an interesting picture as to who might bring the next darkness. You don't even need the color scheme to point Noelle as the next dark fountain creator. Rudy's sickness is a massive Chekhov's gun, and Little Miss, where everything can be healed with a little spell, is not the most mentally stable character around. Not only this, but Susie, Chris, and Noelle are the characters Gaster explicitly points out as wonderful in the introductory sequence. Not even Rousey gets mentioned. If this wasn't enough to emphasize how these 3 are incredibly important, not just to the plot, but to Gaster specifically, the core in Undertale, Gaster's creation, is lit up with lights and tubes that are cyan, magenta, and yellow, almost the exact same tones as Chris, Susie, and Noelle's colors as well. This may seem unintentional to the skeptical viewer, but that specific color combination is not used for no reason, and Deltarune had been thought of long before Undertale. Even though this is common knowledge for the community at this point, I do think it's important to reiterate. Now, besides how the colors work in tandem, it's important to look at each under an individual lens. Most obviously of the four, Chris's colors reflect both humans from Undertale, Frisk and Kara. Kara? Chara? I don't know, man. In the Dark World, Chris reflects Frisk more closely, Undertale's protagonist. The purple and blue look of the pauldron cape mirrors Frisk's shirt, and in the Dark World, gameplay is a lot more similar to a typical RPG with a blank slate protagonist, like Frisk. In the Light World, however, Chris's connections to Kara become much more clear, reflecting how the reality of the Light World puts Chris in a much more Kara-like role compared to Frisk. Their shirt is extremely similar to Kara's. However, it is important to mention that this is likely just a hand-me-down from Asriel, as this is Asriel's iconic shirt, and it would be very in character for the Dreamer household to give Chris solely hand-me-downs. Chris is also the Lightner who changes by far the most color-wise between the Light and Dark Worlds. A nice touch, because besides just looking cool, it likely represents how Chris leads two lives. Now, let's shift gears and start talking about a far more complex color in the context of Deltarune: green. Green, on the surface, has a far less obvious meaning. A lot of Rous's appearance has more to do with his black and white dichotomy, his connection to Asriel, and how he seems to change form, so let's skip out on him at first. One thing green has been shown to mean time and time again is in its relation to Gaster-related gameplay stuff. Similar to the Knight's color being red beneath the black and white coat of the depths, Gaster's underlying color beneath the darkness seems to be green. Additional information here: this segment assumes that Gaster is the mystery man behind the device which connects us to Deltarune, that being Deltarune.exe. They talk exactly the same, another hymn is literally just Gaster's theme, and the dialogue code for the opening monologue is 666. Moving on, many UI elements use the same computer program shade of green, including the box in which all of the fights take place, and the menu select as well. Additionally, interestingly enough, the strings controlling Spamton Neo are also the same shade of computer program green. Furthermore, considering Rous's concrete ties to game mechanics, diegesis, tutorials, and Gaster overall, this connection doesn't seem to come out of nowhere and really makes a lot of sense. If you've been in the community for a bit, you probably know that besides green being the device color, there's a common theory circulating that pre-incident Gaster was Greenster. Credit to @MorkinsLily on X, I despise calling it that, but credit where credit is due, for most of these discoveries. Besides the connections to the device and therefore Gaster that green possesses, green connects to the ideas of creation. Gersten is green, and he is an author who tells Susie that she can defy her archetype and write her own future with her green sparkles specifically. The flavor text even explicitly states that the air crackles green with freedom in his fight. Additionally, Gersten tells Chris that they should go in between the lines and not follow the story set out for them. This frames green as a sort of alternate route, one found in between the pre-existing story, often requiring deliberate deviation, one you need to specifically seek out, or that leads to game-breaking shenanigans. In Chapter 3's Green Room, there are 3 doors: the A rank room in red, the B rank room in green, and the C rank room in blue. The B rank room houses the normal gumball machine, where you can gamble, and sometimes drags you off into the surreal Finder.ogg land that hints at December's supernatural fate. This whole incident of Chris being plopped into the strange location that acts as if it was never meant to exist at all seemingly bends time and space itself, as Chris is suddenly transported from their location in the Dark World to a strange land in which the normal rules don't apply, and no matter how much time is spent in this world, Susie and Rouse don't even notice Chris's sudden absence. And this strange world that Chris is transported to, depicting a scene that is obviously referencing their dark and traumatizing past, is only accessible via the door which is green and in between. In Chapter 4's Egg Room, there are 3 doors, exactly mirroring the layout of those in the previous chapter's Green Room. The one in the middle, where the gumball machine was previously, unlocks the scene where Chris relives their younger days, trying to draw their trauma but repressing it, represented by the tree which hides the forgotten man. Yet again, Chris is transported across space to a similar supernatural land without their party members even noticing a thing. The strange, surreal experience which is obviously referencing Chris's past repressed trauma is only possible to experience by constantly going in between 2 rooms that seem to have nothing in between them besides a default scene transition, and then again taking the door in the middle, an exact one-to-one replica of the green door in the Green Room. In order to access Chapter 3's Egg Room, Man Country, you must go through a series of convoluted steps, ending in an extremely unintuitive interaction with an enemy that doesn't seem to have any relevance until it drops lore about Des and Asriel out of seemingly nowhere in its dialogue, and therefore Chris's past. After doing this, Chris yet again bends time and space, in this case, even Chris's attire is confused as to where the hell they are, to enter Man Country, a world painted solely in shades of green. This unintuitive, secret room that bends the intended way the story would go by shattering space and time is home to the 7 Flying Aces, cards Chris created in childhood to cheat at family card games. The binocular ace reveals that the island of Man Country is surrounded by a sea of gray, a gray almost exactly the same shade as corrupted Gaster bullshit, meaning that since the prophecy is irremovably tied to the depths Gaster area, the background is literally image depths. Man Country is literally overwriting the intended route by going in between the lines. Another flying ace delivers the line that half of you are sick of hearing within the discourse. Copies are monochrome, but you colored each of us in with care. Despite what context may lead you to believe in this case, monochrome is not a synonym of grayscale. In fact, these flying aces are still in monochrome, that is, composed entirely of different shades of a single color. All of the context clues point to that the flying aces were grayscale photocopies of cards, but Chris colored them in with their set of crayons in the past. This use of monochrome in Deltarune in this way happens again in the Chapter 4 Egg Room, in which Chris leaves a monochrome smear with a pencil, which is obviously just grayscale since it's a pencil. Even saying that a faint gray crease glittered stubbornly, when talking about the smudged hand from the previous art escapade. Basically, I think Toby meant grayscale in these cases, not monochrome. This conclusion makes what the ace is trying to say far more clear. Monochrome, or grayscale, copies of existing characters, i.e. the Vessel to Chris, Goner Kid to Monster Kid, and every single Goner in Undertale, etc., can be colored in to stabilize them, sort of, to make them real, less than just a copy. Since they were copies, they originally had color before it was sapped out of them, or, as a copy, their original had color, and then they were reflected in a version that did not have that original color. So giving them this color back is a way to restore them in some way. We know Man Country is special because it is the only place the Forgotten Man can speak. In the Sea of Grey, this green island stabilizes his state. It's plain to see how this dichotomy between green humanity and gray darkness, and the surreal circumstance surrounding each of these three locations is extremely relevant to Gaster. His rooms in his home game, Undertale, evoke very similar vibes to these three, not experienced by most players as a sort of quote-unquote Easter egg as if it wasn't even supposed to be there initially. I mean, half the shit in those three places have to do with Des, who is already the other large character theorized to be touched by the depths. I also have a working theory that these three locations are like our sneak peek into the depths, or at least incredibly close to them geographically speaking, considering the crazy obvious similarities all three have to each other, and Gaster's descriptions, including that he was shattered across time and space, that he's tied to Chris and their past because of Des' disappearance, and just the general esoteric and surreal vibes of each of these places perfectly matching a borderline depths location, and it literalizes a lot of the green overriding grayscale stuff I was talking about earlier. However, don't hold me to that one, because I'm not completely certain. But the game itself doesn't exactly seem to know where Chris is either, so I take that as a strong point in my favor. But in my opinion, the craziest, and by far my favorite connection from Gaster to the green and in-between bullshit is in Sans and Papyrus's house. The door to Gaster's room is a grayscale copy of the doors in the Skelebros house. That much was confirmed in Undertale's 10th anniversary livestream explicitly. We know the Skeleton Brothers have deep connections to Gaster, the smoking gun obviously being Sans' Gaster blasters, so this isn't out of the blue whatsoever. Now, remember how all those weird rooms tie back together to these three doors? Red, green, and blue in the green room, in that order? Almost like Papyrus, the red skeleton's room, and Sans' room on the right, the blue skeleton, with a suspicious place right in the middle, which the internal geometry of the house leaves perfect to be filled. Like, actually, it seems like there should be a room here just based on the house's layout. But what is there instead? In between the two doors that are colored inversions of Gaster's and Waterfall, there is a green painting. So, Gaster used to be green and is now stuck in between, lost in the code like Des. And the two actual egg rooms, for some reason the first two chapters ones are like tech demos, along with the 1225 Gumball room, are deeply tied to Gaster's fate and his current role in the story. Green in particular being the color of creation, the color able to pierce the veil of the pre-existing story and go in between the lines, into the egg rooms and break the story to figure out what's truly going on, paints it as a unique symbolic stabilizing power for the depths. As always when it comes to discussing deep Deltarune lore, especially about the depths, December Holiday acts as the emotional anchor for why any of us should actually care about this. She's the one we actually want to see stabilized from whatever her current state is as the Roaring Knight. If you watched my last theory, you know that I was thoroughly confused by the state of Des as the Roaring Knight, as in how in control she was, and many of you left very insightful comments. However, I believe this whole analysis pretty squarely answers my question. Des' redness, if you agree with what I posited earlier that red is her primary color, was sapped from her like Gaster. That's how her consciousness can be unused, because she's monochrome now. She got goneritis from Gaster or whatever. And yet again, Gaster walks so Des could get lost, establishing the lore through himself as an active character, through going through something similar while allowing Des to take a more backseat role to preserve her status as the Lost Girl, while establishing the lore that allows to be explained while keeping her lost. That makes sense, right? Alright, let's rein it back in, and start focusing on the other two colors I brought up at the start, pink and yellow. Pink and yellow, huh. Alright, I'm done burying the lead. This is the real reason why this video even exists. The sheer importance of these two colors and how often they appear is so interesting. And while I see the community having collective hallucinogenic episodes every other week about this combo, and seeing them in NPC number 215's shadow, and therefore they are Gaster, okay, I see the hypocrisy, fair. I see shockingly few people mention how they are the primary colors of two members of our main cast. Many instances of pink and gold appear throughout Deltarune, some more obvious than others, and some being very clearly stretches. The most obvious, clear depictions of the color scheme are Spamton's glasses, Image Friend, the game controller for the Shadow Mantle game, the field of pink and gold, basically a hint of it at Asgore's Dark World, and Mike literally everywhere in those games, especially in Pluie. Prior to the release of Chapters 3 and 4, and even directly after it, there seemed to be a community consensus that these are the Shadow Crystal colors. Spamton definitely has it, Jevil has a pretty good version of it, the Shadow Mantle minigame has it very explicitly, arguably even more so than Spamton, and Gersten has both pink and yellow in his color scheme, and literally says the words that set the fandom on fire, the field of pink and gold. But I think there's a deeper reason for pink and gold than just pointing you on the path to the Shadow Crystals. While that's clearly an aspect, and actually instrumental to my theory at the end, Friend seems far more involved with the greater story and history than just being a subset of the Shadow Crystal plotline, especially in how the Mike fight presents the two. I think it's finally time to talk about that Mike fight, and the girl it is intrinsically tied to. I've seen far too many people writing off Mike's fight and minigames as just a joke, making fun of theorizers like me, who read too much into things. On the other end of the spectrum, I do think there are people who read too much into Mike as a character. Genuinely, I think he might just be around for a joke, and isn't planned to be anybody. I mean, there's literally a friend inside me reference inside of him. How genuine lore can he have? I think there's a middle ground between the two, though. What's important about Mike and his room are the minigames, Batat, Pluie, and Jongler, giving a view into Noel's cat petter games. The focus on felines, luck, and the colors pink and gold present in these minigames illustrate exactly how they are truly relevant in Deltarune's story, and not just a joke, despite the Mike characters themselves probably just being jokes. Each of these minigames that the Mikes present are exactly analogous to the ones in Cat Petters 2, which Noelle describes in her blog posts. Noelle actually literally says that Jongler is one of the minigames in Cat Petters 2 in her blog post, where she says that, anyways, on days where it rains, nothing was better than playing cat petters. Specifically the minigames you can play with your cats. They were all ridiculous, and every one of them had these super silly rific names, like Jongler or something. These Mike minigames illustrate games within games, showing what ties pink and gold as a color combination deeply and conceptually have to Noelle's blog posts about her gaming misadventures. Speaking of Noelle's blog posts, if there's one thing that came out of the Spamton sweepstakes, it really is those Holiday Girl 1225 internet forums that come to mind. These are probably Friend's most important appearances, as they are central to this idea of being a luck-based cat that only appears in the most hidden parts of games. The parts that you aren't meant to explore, but you can break into if you really try hard enough. Therefore, it's incredibly important to discuss what Noelle has to say in these posts. In the first post, Noelle narrates her experience getting a strange egg in Cat Petters, which wouldn't hatch and was labeled special. The weird way this egg acts, disappearing in strange ways and seemingly not being a part of the game's reality, is exceedingly similar to how the eggs work in Deltarune itself. And since this post leads to the secret cat game, which unlocks the website ARG that mirrors the egg room of Chapter 4, this connection is cemented. Since Chris is the character central to the repressed trauma the eggs present, the different ways Noelle and Chris act around these video game secrets, literally the Easter eggs in each of their games, is very telling to the two's different perspectives. Chris is haunted by the past, Noelle actively seeks it out. This is likely because Chris feels far more guilt concerning Noelle's sister's disappearance than Noelle herself. Furthermore, I went more into depth on this concept in my previous video, The Depths Theory, which you should totally check out, by the way. But to make a long story short, Friend is intrinsically tied to Roots and the concept of the children going missing, which is also deeply intertwined with the egg room and Chris's trauma. Since Friend often is used as a stand-in for that secret, that game Easter egg that Noelle is able to find, as in the Mike minigame, that's exactly what it is, the secret which is analogous to the secrets in Cat Petters that she found, just like the eggs are also analogous to it. Basically, both Friend and the Forgotten Man's eggs are literal Easter eggs in the game of Deltarune, which Noelle also experiences in Cat Petters, and since those are analogous to each other, the narrative symbolism in-game of them having to do with Dessa's disappearance, and the way Chris and Noelle separately react to both the Forgotten Man's eggs and Friend, show how they react to their trauma concerning Des, because, as we know, the narrative subtext in the game has Friend and the Forgotten Man have to do with that deeply. The link within this blog post about the egg leads to one describing the Batat minigame, and how Noelle is incredibly curious about the creepypasta, weird, early internet playground rumor type stuff present in video games. This is furthered in the final of Noelle's relevant blog posts, the one concerning the Ice Palace from Dragon Blazers 2. This is what she says. Did anyone else wander around this screen as a kid? The cross-shaped maze in the area from Dragon Blazers. Once you go in it, no matter where you go, you'll always be brought back to the same room. Normally, one of the characters is supposed to guide you through the maze, but it became one of the most famous, or should I say infamous, parts of the game because if you go there without that character, you'll basically get stuck. Forever. This quote is pretty familiar, but I can't put my finger on it. Okay, it's literally just the roots area of the sword root. That is what the Ice Palace is. If the connection wasn't enough already, the URL for the blog post is deltarune.com/icepalace_glacier, specifically misspelled with the E before the I. Guess what the track that plays during this segment of the Mantle minigame is called? That's right, Glacier, with the E specifically before the I. Besides the obviously strange implication that Cat Pedders and Dragon Blazers are both recreated as games within games in the Dark Worlds, making the escapism angle of Dark Worlds possibly a lot more literal than many fans think, what does this mean for Noelle's character? Well, since they're analogous, just like how the Ice Mage in the Mantle game knows the path to go down for some unexplained reason, Noelle intrinsically knew the way to go as well too. In the blog post, she continues on, saying, "As a kid, I had no idea this was a glitch. I spent literally hours on the screen wandering around thinking there was an exit. The thing is, there actually is one. Somehow, Kid Me was so stubborn, I think I went every single possible direction somehow. Then, the last direction you go is up. If you do that, you'll find a door that doesn't appear anywhere else in the game." This shocked me so much as a kid, I screamed and pulled my controller so hard it unplugged the console. I actually started crying, but I knew that my mom would turn off the game if she heard me, so I held my breath and started hiccuping and gasping. I literally thought I was going to choke on my tears. It only made me cry more when I had to plug the game back in myself. I was so scared that I would get electrocuted and die from the wires. I was actually always afraid of electrical sockets too, because I thought that they were looking at me. Come on, I wasn't a weird kid, I promise. I got over it after that. So, I started the game again, and with my hands shaking, I went back into the maze. But what's super weird was that somehow I was able to get right back to the door. I was so happy I almost had started screaming again, but remembered to hold my breath halfway. Now I was going to be able to see what was in that secret door, or so I thought. It was locked. And I've never been able to find any key in the game that opens it. Since then, I can actually get to the door pretty consistently if I concentrate. Noelle just knows the way to get to this door for some unexplainable reason. This blog post is scarily analogous to the Mantle game of Chapter 3, even down to the key that Noelle can't find, since in this game there is a key at the end of the Ice Palace. But the reason why Noelle can't find the key is because she is the key. The way to continue down this forbidden path that you're not supposed to see is to use her up, through the Ice Key. The hidden path began with ice magic. Unlocking her true ability through ice magic, you can use the Ice Mage to break the game, get somewhere you aren't supposed to. Chris is the key to unlock Noelle's ice, using your puppet of Chris to get to the one who can truly break the game in Noelle. There's a reason the ice key is the exact same cyan color as Chris, and it's not just because it's ice. The shelter key is pink when you get it first, and then when it's used it turns yellow, and the only way to get there is through using up Noelle. Noelle is constantly referenced to have something about her that can just find secrets in video games. She finds the eggs, completes the Ice Palace, and even explicitly in-game talks to Susie about how she basically did the equivalent of the Undertale genocide route in its game equivalent. Oh my gosh, I played 2 with my dad, but there was this evil route my parents didn't know about. I always played it in secret so they wouldn't take it away. She is exactly the player of games that Toby was deconstructing in Undertale, the one that goes to any lengths to sap all of the content and secrets out of the games she enjoys. Basically, she would definitely have a Deltarune YouTube channel making theory videos about how Gaster is behind everything. But Noelle isn't just an Undertale genocide player. She is one who would do the weird route if she was in our shoes. She would try to break the game, to defy fate, and there's something inherent about her character that can do that. We know Noelle likes to be scared because it reminds her of good memories with Des. And I think something similar can be said with how Noelle enjoys discovering secrets in games. She is constantly searching for Des, that's why she checks her email so often, just to check if Des reached out to her. Furthermore, December is very, very clearly associated with being lost in Secrets of Deltarune, the lost girl haunting the narrative. Hell, we even discussed earlier how all of those unexpected parts of the game that you aren't really supposed to access that bend time and space have to do deeply with December's disappearance and her character as a whole. Noelle would be able to access this if she was playing Deltarune, or she would seek it out explicitly for this reason. These two aspects of Noelle's character, her yearning for her lost sister and need to discover all of the secrets in the game she plays, are deeply intertwined. This makes the concept of the weird route sort of destroying Carol and Chris's plan, and almost certainly dooming Des, as she appears less and less in the narrative, very, very interesting. Since the knight is clearly on the side of fate and the prophecy, it seems that following the instructions is the best way to free her, to free Des. And Noelle's deep digging into the fabric of Deltarune's reality is actually sort of counterintuitive when it comes to rescuing her sister. Now, Deltarune is all about fate and freedom. I mean, it's one of, if not the core theme present in the game, exemplified in the motivations of our antagonists. The prophecy itself, almost every one of the main cast's motivations, etc. Noelle's ability to break games, to break fate, even if it is through the horrific route of Snowgrave, must therefore be incredibly important. We know the weird route is breaking Deltarune's intended path, due to the parallels it draws to Noelle's past game-breaking experiences in the sword route, the way it's presented as a playground room or alternate path that takes these elaborate, confused steps to unlock, and Rousey's weird route exclusive dialogue all but explicitly spelling out that this route defies the prophecy. Noelle can give us freedom, if we use her up. The way the weird route presents Noelle becoming free is through being manipulated into becoming stronger. It's repeated over and over again ad nauseum that she's getting stronger, and that's good. Noelle rationalizes this whole route like this, thinking that, what was I thinking? Chris wasn't trying to hurt me. They were just making me stronger. Whenever Noelle freezes an enemy, it says Noelle got stronger. We're leveling her up, making her so powerful and broken that we can break the game through sheer force. This is reflected in the way Noelle breaks games, through methodically getting more powerful, defeating enemies not out of malice or anger, but through an analytical, quantitative lens of gaining strength and just seeing what could happen. Now, obviously, this by no means makes Noelle a villain, whose true self is a murderous psychopath. She's a shy, easily manipulated teenager who likes to mess around in video games, who we take control of, figuratively, and soon enough, possibly literally as well. But this ability to change things through getting stronger, to defy fate, we didn't put that there. It's always been there. It's a part of her character. There is something intrinsic to Noelle that makes her able to break video games, to defy the intended way that things are supposed to go, to shatter her fate. Shifting subjects real quick, why don't we talk about a girl with a strikingly similar yet still unique relationship with the Strings of Fate, Susie. Susie is a very, very interesting character. Possibly the most important character in all of Deltarune. She is the only one so far who can defy the will of us, the soul, and challenge our authority directly. She refuses to cooperate with us all throughout Chapter 1, she steals Chris's patented acting ability and gives her and Rousey the ability to do said acting in Chapter 2, she subverts her role as the damage dealer of the party when she focuses on healing throughout the game instead of damage. She takes Rousey through Cyber City, removing the player's choice on who to hang out with. This one decision where she defies our free will is actually the only reason why the weird route is even possible. If Rousey was allowed to stick to the script and Susie didn't be Susie and mess it all up, Chris and Noelle never would have been alone in the city, and therefore we never would have had the opportunity to corrupt the deer. Adding to examples of Susie's unique resistance, throughout Chapter 3, she is the driving force of attempting to end things with Tenna, Rousey being in a supporting role throughout the whole arc. She is the one who gets the black shard from the knight and is the only one truly fighting them, Chris half-assing it and Rousey's motives being too complicated to place them firmly on opposing sides. This pattern is cemented by Gerson, who immediately recognizes this unique ability she has and helps her realize it herself. Susie is especially able to defy any characters who put a stopper on anything limiting her personal freedom. No matter how powerful the entity trying to control her is, she continually embodies autonomy itself. Our choice may not matter, but hers certainly do. By contrast, Susie's best friend is the character in the cast the most severely lacking that sweet, sweet freedom sauce. Chris is quite literally controlled by us, and outside of that obvious symbolism, is being manipulated by their friend's insane mother to commit unspeakable crimes, with very little say in the matter. Despite this though, Chris still possesses the ability to create things. Their weapon of choice, a sword, is equivalent to a pencil in the light world, a writing utensil, one that can create stories. Chris is even able to create within the bounds of their plan with Carol, making fiction in Chapter 3, pouring their internal thoughts into a world of their own design. Furthermore, in Chapter 4, Chris is given the opportunity to have one of the longest soul-free experiences they get throughout the whole game thus far. And what do they decide to do? They make music. Chris uses the Holidays piano to play beautiful renditions of the many important songs throughout the game thus far. And besides calling into question the diegesis of Deltarune's OST, this acts as an example of creation. Chris using their sliver of freedom to create something beautiful, via the symbol of the piano. Susie, on the other hand, does not create. The piano isn't for her. In her past, she tells the story. So, in one of the places I used to live, there was like this plaza, and they had this public piano in it. So I started playing it, thinking, it might be fun. But, I guess, maybe because I was so bad, or because I just looked like I shouldn't be playing, they told me I wasn't allowed to play it. So I backed off. And then they let somebody else play. Someone better. Ever since Chapter 1, her weapon has been the axe, one that doesn't make anything, only destroys it. She opened the game feeling that her only use was destruction, violently facing anything that stood in her way. This destructive behavior is also shown in the continuation of the piano anecdote, where she goes on to explain that night, when no one else was around, I came back. And you know what I did? I smashed it. Yeah, I smashed the piano. I don't even really know if I broke it, but I hit it as hard as I could, hard enough to do some damage, and I ran. Susie has been told all her life that she isn't good enough to make anything of herself, to make anything herself, for one reason or another. This is a girl who destroys things to cope, who pushes everyone away because why would anyone really want to be her friend anyway? Nobody can get close to her because she thinks she doesn't deserve it. All she's good for is breaking things. While by the end of Chapter 1, Susie begins to realize through Lancer, Chris, and Rouse that she does deserve love and friendship, she still doesn't have the confidence in herself to believe in her own creations. Despite the outer facade falling through, Susie still focuses largely on destruction and violence, but this does begin to shift when Susie starts to try to learn healing. This is the first mark of Susie beginning to try and grow herself outside of the archetypical damage dealer in an RPG, and the archetype she fit herself into for so many years. As Susie cultivates the skill of healing, she meets someone who will help her as a mentor to fully gain the self-confidence necessary to create. That's when she meets Gerson Boom. Gerson acts as a mentor for Susie, supporting her search to subvert her role, learning to do more than just destroy. This is first exemplified in how Gerson encourages her healing, an aspect of her character completely her own. Through this, he subtly deconstructs Susie's idea that all she can do is destroy, opening the door for her to finally be able to create. At the apex of their arc together, they have a friendly duel in which the only way Susie is able to win is by not solely fighting, but by using her healing, focusing on the power that she created for herself. During this duel, Gerson says that the ones who could write the next, the youth, the pen was lying there for them to pick up, to make the next page. They never did. But you, my dear, I see a story lit up in your eyes, burning bright, burning black, burning up everything. The bell's ringing now. Seems we've reached the final rounds. So, how do you think it all ends? No. How do you want it to end? Gerson tells Susie she can create her own path. She can make her own way. If she just begins creating, she will be able to divert from the intended ending of the prophecy. She can pick up the pen. She can write her own ending. Susie is then finally able to create something. She makes a dark world, obviously to get the code and see Gerson again, but thematically, this is her first real act of creation. After Gerson's encouragement, she is able to make her first creation, and starts building instead of breaking. Having established that Susie's arc of self-acceptance so far ends in her being able to create and subvert her original archetypical role, why is this so important to what I was talking about earlier? Well, due to Susie's inherent ability to change the script, her writing her own ending is not only extremely possible, but almost blatantly said to be within her abilities by Gerson. That's why she's so unbothered by the final prophecy panel. She spent the whole day finally believing that she can change it. There is a way for her to write her own ending. Stories can be retold. They can be changed. That's what I believe. We know the prophecy that Susie wants to change is darkness. The background is literally image depths. I've said that a lot. But the important thing is what Gerson says about Susie's relationship with the supposed immutable story in the dark. But there's one thing that can override the dark. A white pen, known as hope. Miss, I believe this is what you hold. No wonder Susie is the girl with hope crossed on her heart. Her hope is what makes her able to defy the prophecy. In overcoming her self-hatred, she can write her own story. That's why she's holding a sword in her prophecy panel. Not because she's Noelle, but because by the end of the game, Susie will have completed her arc and will be able to create. She'll adopt the pen of hope Gerson mentioned, put down the weapon of destruction for good, and finally accept herself completely for who she is. Not the destructive fighter she convinced everyone she was, including herself, but the kind, compassionate character who would do anything for her friends. With this, she can finally defy the prophecy. Her hope, this intrinsic quality to her, can allow her to subvert the tragedy once she gains the confidence to write her own ending. Susie's entire arc, her learning that she is worthy of respect, love, and friendship, would all come to a close in her finally being able to fully escape her destructive nature from the beginning of the game. Let's return to that conversation Noelle and Susie shared about the evil root that they found, the hidden path in Dragon Blazers. Susie responds to Noelle in an interaction I omitted earlier. Dude, I think I did that by accident. You did the evil root by accident? Yeah, I didn't know you could be nice, so I was just killing everything and getting, pissed. Why the hell is everyone mad? Pretty sure I'd do it the good way now, though. Not only is this an illustration of Susie's development from Chapter 1, when she would indiscriminately kill and haphazardly brutalize anybody in her way, but it shows how both Noelle and Susie can break games explicitly, furthering the mirror of their actual real-world abilities to the games within Deltarune. There is something intrinsic about Susie's character that makes her able to break video games, to defy the intended way that things are supposed to go, to shatter fate. Wait. Both Susie and Noelle seem to be the only characters that can defy the prophecy. Where they differ is how they do so. Noelle uses power to force change, getting stronger no matter the cost, while Susie uses hope to author her own ending. The weird root is all about breaking the game through getting as strong as possible, so strong it literally breaks it. While this is a meta-critique of how players interact with RPGs, specifically players similar to Noelle, using characters solely as tools. Hell, Noelle literally was the key in the Mantle minigame. It also acts in accordance to Noelle's actual textual character. Being shy and passive, Noelle does not have the assertiveness to deny us what we want in the weird root, and she's willing to do it because she, just like Chris, will do almost anything deep down to be free, to escape the helplessness of her situation. Both Noelle and Chris, somewhere, deep down, enjoy the weird root, because it gives them the freedom they both sorely lack, and helps them escape their helplessness and guilt respectively. So in order to gain agency, Noelle overpowers the script, but there needs to be somewhere to get all that power from, and the answer isn't pretty. Susie, on the other hand, has hope crossed on her heart. She can defy the power of those who seek to limit her freedom, and embodies personal autonomy as a character herself. But instead of gaining this ability through pure power and game stats, she does it through defying her archetypical role as the damage dealer, and becoming the author of her own ending. She unlocks her hope for a better future, and this will allow her to make that future a reality. And together, the two colors primarily associated with these fate breakers make pink and yellow. As a color scheme, the two largest instances of each color being used are in the main cast. Yet, the game seems to be drawing importance especially when these colors are used in tandem. Friend, another being from the depths, with ties to our favorite W.D. Gaster, possesses that iconic heterochromia of the two colors, and their appearances are limited to the basement containing Spamton Neo's body, the mini-games in which they reflect Noelle's strange and surreal experiences with her video games, the Mantle minigame where they appear extremely often, and finally as an example of Rouse's descriptions of Dark Worlds, and also nearby the Titan spawn. However, that likely just acts as a furthering of their nature as being some hyper-darkness from the depths. Outside of Friend, there are two other characters which possess the same pink and gold eye colors, Spamton and Pluie. There's a pretty high chance the Devil's Knife and Gerson as well have pink and gold undertones, but those aren't as explicit as the extremely obvious Friend parallels Spamton and Pluie both have. The connection I'm making on the yellow end of the spectrum may seem much more apparent at first. Noelle's game-breakiness is apparent through her experiences with the games she writes about in her blog posts, which are reflected in the Mike and Mantle minigames, in which Friend shows up like crazy, and there's also the pink and yellow controller which is used to pilot the Mantle game, and the character we wield within it. Said Mantle game also directly parallels the weird root, and the real-world effects of Noelle's abilities. Pluie, however, as a character possessing similar heterochromia, just further cements this interpretation as almost inarguable. Pink and gold appears in these instances as a way to hint at the closeness these situations have to Noelle's way of attaining freedom, paralleling how she does so in her video games that she writes about. On the other hand, how this matters to Susie's story is far more subtle. At first glance, Friend's appearance near the Neo body and Spamton's heterochromia have little to do with her story. That is until you realize that Spamton, Jevil, and Gerson possess the second greatest diversion from the main narrative thus far, the only other choice we could do, besides Snowgrave, that does actually seem to matter. It's the Shadow Crystals. Susie only gets her development with Gerson if you fully follow the Shadow Crystal questline, which I believe may be leading up to a moment where Susie is able to defy fate herself. As we stated very early on in this theory, initially many people posited that pink and gold was the color of the Shadow Crystal root, a sort of hint at how to get the Shadow Crystals, or a color related to freedom and the freedom motif in the Shadow Crystal root. And this still rings true. Pink and gold is very related to Shadow Crystals. It just goes far deeper than solely that. This interpretation actually clarifies a lot, with the Mantle minigame's role suddenly being much more clear. The numerous appearances of Friend in this game is because it's the bridge between the pink and the yellow roots, the Shadow Crystals and the Weird Root, both as alternative means to achieve freedom. John Mantle actually explicitly references both of these choices as attempts to attain autonomy, and therefore their connection through the color scheme of pink and yellow. That's why you're searching for them, aren't you? The Shadow Crystals. And the Shadow Mantle that I'm holding. Do you honestly think it'll get you what you want? No, part of you is just enjoying this, isn't it? The same part of you that enjoyed yesterday. If my analysis explaining that both the Weird Root and Shadow Crystal collection, Noelle and Susie, are both different means to the same attempted ends, that being defiance of fate itself, this is a blatant explanation of exactly that, the deep connection the two have, and how Chris yearns for freedom either way, that it will get them exactly what they want. either collecting the shadow crystals or what they did yesterday. If this is true, and pink and yellow represent different means to achieve freedom through the shadow crystals or Snowgrave, that explains how both Susie and Noelle can have fate-defying tendencies, while also being able, in-game, to give each of them their moment to shine. Narratively speaking, the main route is building up to the tragedy of the prophecy and Susie somehow breaking it. If this was a novel or TV series instead of a video game with an actually one ending, that would seem to be the primary direction the story is moving towards. However, meta-narratively, if the tragedy never happens, there seems to be no reason for a player to do Snowgrave in an attempt to avert said tragedy. The weird route does seem to be painted, so far, as a player's drastic attempt to exert their control over the game's world, despite their initial purpose as a pawn for Carol's scheme, which likely involves the prophecy coming true. If the prophecy doesn't come true, the tragedy never transpires, the Snowgrave route is weakened on a meta level. However, if Susie never gets her moment to defy the prophecy and complete her arc setup all throughout the game, but especially in Chapter 4's Shadow Crystal arc, it would sort of feel like an anticlimax. So, what if we can have both? We already know the Shadow Crystals are leading up to some sort of alternate route. Sham basically says as much, and despite the experience of your average Deltarune fan, the crystals are actually very hidden, and almost nobody would collect all 4 on their first run without outside help. A common critique I've seen of Chapter 4 is that it is far narratively weaker if you don't complete Gerson's quest and obtain the Shadow Crystal. But what if that's kind of the point? The Shadow Crystal collections do present a somewhat significant deviation from the main plot being set up thus far, and with Gerson's ties to Susie's arc completion and the previously mentioned color symbolism, it makes perfect sense for that route to be the ending in which Susie gets to write her own ending, possibly using whatever object the Shadow Crystals can create to do so, or something similar. Maybe even a sword to comment on the pen allegory I was talking about earlier. If this is true, it not only solidifies the two-sided nature of freedom that the dichotomous Susie versus Noelle relationship already presents, and it's allure nonetheless, but it also quite literally solves every single problem we mentioned above, and solidifies the pink and yellow symbolism quite nicely. Nevertheless, we can go even further than this. We went over the importance of green imagery in Deltarune earlier, and as you know, much of that analysis had to do with Susie's arc. Most obviously, Gerson, her mentor, is primarily green, and the sole color present in his fight is green, the air crackles green with freedom, and so on and so forth. There's even the way that Susie defies her archetype by using the green sparkles of healing and overcoming her predetermined role, using the standards of an RPG to emphasize her subversion of the status quo. Deltarune does this a lot, actually, subverting your expectations by establishing tropes and then deconstructing them. It's a Toby Fox game staple. But all the analysis of green and in between, how green can override the depths and stabilize the darkness, also applies to Susie in this case. Her green, her ability to hope, allows her to write her own ending. Susie's newfound ability to create and break out of her archetype is represented by the color green, and as we have already established, that color has the power to override the depths, ergo the prophecy too. Susie's hope and creativity are the means she uses to attain autonomy. On the other hand, the weird route already has a lot of red imagery. Hell, look at the Thorn Ring, the item instrumental to this route which sets it all in motion. It's exemplified by a red rose, or was until that scene was censored so people didn't think Noelle was sexually assaulted. Plus, throughout that scene, the color red was extremely pervasive. Chris's hair was suddenly dyed for dramatic effect, and the whole goddamn scene was overlaid with the color. It cannot get more blatant than that. Then, when thinking about Noelle later, Chris imagines a small red pixel, very likely a new soul that we planted in Noelle to take control over her as our new, more powerful vessel. We know the soul is instrumental to Carol's plans and represents a lack of control. Hell, maybe that's what blue represents, since Carol's primary color is blue, the character literally manipulating Chris's trauma to disestablish their autonomy, and Chris in the Dark World is blue, the state in which they have far less control over their actions compared to the Light World. But that blue plan requires our red soul to work, using our power as a tool to complete the plan. I mean, Carol clearly loves us. But what if the soul's power doesn't want to cooperate? What if we, as the player, exert our freedom over the characters? What if we become free, using the means of red in the soul to seize what we want? That is the weird route, the yellow route, the one in which we turn Noelle into our willing vessel. Hey, was the Queen Peon thing foreshadowing? And gain freedom by any means necessary, even if those means are haunted by the red of its victims. Deltarune's colors are not only incredibly interesting to analyze, but help us predict the future of the game, and unlock the secrets of where it may be going, and the two routes which can break that preset ending. Looking at the story through the lens of colors helps us rationalize how the story may end, and the multiple routes open to get us there, despite Deltarune apparently only having one ending. I always hated how everyone took that at face value. It would completely defeat the excitement and magic of defying the narrative if Toby explicitly told us that there was an alternate ending, or two for that matter. There's a reason he doesn't acknowledge the weird route ever. Looking at the story of Deltarune and its most important characters from this angle enlightens whole new possibilities for what the story has in store for us. Pink and yellow, manifested on a micro level as characters completely opposite in personality and literal color, but yet drawn together nonetheless in an attempt to achieve the same goal, is reflected on the macro level in the main roots of the game, and the most pervasive and infamous color combination throughout all of Deltarune. No matter what Deltarune has in store for us, even if I'm completely and totally wrong, I believe it will be like the most awesome thing ever and destroy our expectations. But with Chapter 5's Dark World gearing up to have the most pink and gold imagery yet, if Gersten has any legitimacy, I don't believe this color combination's relevance is going anywhere. And if I'm right on what it means, Chapter 5 might be completely earth-shattering for the narrative status quo in ways none of us expect. Until our Lord Gaster decides to bless us with the next chapter of this story, though, it's impossible to know. So look out for my next theory, and until then, bye.